Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Charles Monroe. This is Tuft Talk by CMC. We are so looking forward to you hearing this next part of this episode about the history of CMC and how it was started, the vision that Lewie and Charlie had as they moved into this new chapter, and also how did they become the global leader in the tufting industry. Let's go.
Spot right here. And so I said, well, okay, I'll go see Lewie and see if he would be interested in going in business with me. He was. And he had grown up pretty much with tufting in his blood, had tufting machinery in his blood. And so he and I struck off on this new business, Charles Monroe Company. I had a little bit of name recognition is a reason for that. And
this is 1981, right?
This was in 1981. This was April Fool's Day, 1981. I came over here and to this building, and Lewie and I started Charles Monroe Company.
CMC.
And eventually we were Lewie and I were buying some gauge parts from different little businesses here and there, and reselling them. And we found some old frames, old card frames. We started converting those frames, and to our surprise, people would actually buy them from us. And so we
and y'all were in your early 30s, mid 30s, early 30s,
yes.
Early 30s.
Yes. Early 30s.
These youngins they knew a thing or two about a tufting machine, or at least you fooled them into thinking that.
That's true. So we did hire a couple of folks that were extremely helpful, and Lewis had told us about Lewis and Roy both, I guess. Maybe both of them, but anyway, Lewis and Roy told us about a gentleman, James Jackson, who helped them set up the gauge parts manufacturing at Cobble Brothers. I mean, this is going way back. And then when they started Card Company, they got James Jackson to come and help them there to set up this precision equipment making gauge parts. So at the time CMC started, James and his son Sonny Jackson had a slat cutting business, a slat pattern attachment, which was a mechanical pattern making attachment, and you would have to cut slats in these aluminum bars to create the pattern. And so that's what they were doing in their little business. So we went down there and approached them about joining CMC. We didn't have any money, but we said we would do a stock swap. And so we gave them a stock for their company. And they would either be the biggest fools or or whatever, but it worked out. We had been challenged by a customer, actually Milliken Corporation, in the day to increase the accuracy when we were at Tufco, increase the accuracy of our gauge parts, particularly needle bars. Milliken is a very scientific company, and were especially that in their time back then. And so they were actually taking the needle bars we made while we were at Tufco and measuring them, and they would tell us what the accuracy was, and it wasn't very good. Wasn't as good as it needed to be because the gauges were moving finer and finer. They're no longer quarter gauge or 3/16 gauge, but they were hoping to make a 10th gauge.
And in simplistic terms, gauge is just the distance between each needle.
That's right. That's right. So quarter gauge would be 4 needles per inch. 3/16 would be 5.3, 564, 6.4 needles per inch.
So the more needles you put within that inch width, the tougher it is to make that carpet, and thus the gauge parts are harder just because you're so tight.
That's right. Yeah. The finer you go in gauge, the smaller the needles get, and the needles have a target on them that the looper has to cross. And so it's all of that's got to work. When you think you've got, in 10th gauge, you'd have 1,800 needles, and those 1,800 needles each had a corresponding looper that had to cross them, and a knife that would then cut the yarn off. I'm talking about a 10th gauge cut pile machine. That was pretty accurate. It needed to be really accurate.
That's a lot of small targets you have to hit.
That's right.
So you had, at that time, it was you and Lewie, and you had the Jackson family that came on board from a machine shop perspective of those tighter tolerance parts. You all also invested in some machining equipment to start doing some work on existing frames and existing parts. So then how did you get into the new tufting machine business, where you began then selling the new versions of tufting?
That's right. Once we were able to make these gauge parts with such accuracy, with the help of the Jacksons, then we started selling gauge parts and gauge conversions for existing machines. It was a time in the industry when it was not all that strong, but they were looking for ways to improve their existing machines. So they would allow us to put our cutting system, which was a huge improvement, and especially as carpet gauges were becoming finer and finer. So your carpet was being more and more refined, moving from 3/8 gauge shag, as you people know what shag is, to a finer cut pile, more dense carpet. And so we would go in and we would replace all the gauge parts in a given plant with our gauge parts. Well, then when they decided to buy a new machine, what are they going to do? They're going to buy our machine. And so they came to us and said, well, it's nice that you're making used machines. When are you going to make a new machine? Yeah. And we said, I don't know, but I guess we will. So we started making new machines, and the rest was history from there.
So that's interesting, because you all perfected more of the tire tolerance heart of the machine. So then the other parts of the machine were just kind of a no-brainer from the customer perspective once you were doing that. So we spoke to, initially it was Charles Monroe Company. That was because there was a no-compete by Lewis and Roy. So there's no family left in Cobble, no family left in Tufco.
That's right. The only family is you and Lewie here at Charles Monroe Company.
When did it become Card-Monroe Company with the addition of Lewis and Roy to this business?
Well, it didn't take us long at that rate of growth to run out of capital, run out of money. And so in 1982, about mid-1982, Lewis and Roy saw that, hey, these guys are going to make a business out of it. So they decided to invest in Charles Monroe Company, and then it became Card-Monroe Corporation, which it is today.
Yeah.
CMC, known in the industry as CMC.
That's right.
And so the rest is history. We built a few machines since then.
Just a few.
Just a few thousand.
I will say some of those people around the world probably don't know, but they may still have a Charles Monroe machine still out there. The machines run so well, they just see the initials. Yeah. It's the best machine out here.
Still CMC.
You might find a couple of those in Mexico or somewhere. Yeah.
Does it have a painted logo or does it have a plaque? That's how you tell.
So this is, we're going to tell on y'all. This is what y'all did. So you took a Card Company old machine plate here, and you made some fancy stenciling.
That's called resourceful.
That is resourceful.
That was hand painted by Morris Lovelady. I want you to know that.
Shout out Brian Lovelady. Your dad Morris here, hand painted. So then you all stepped it up a notch, and I got a good story on this one. This is machine number 130, which I think was really machine 30.
That's right.
Okay, so This one, actually, I saw this at a customer's facility in California. And I said, hey, I'll send you an actual CMC Card-Monroe plate if I can have that one. So I did a little swappage and trade so that I would personally have this Charles Monroe plate before it became Card-Monroe. So got that one for the books. So we talked a lot about, the Card-Monroe brand and the CMC brand. We'll get into the global nature that CMC kind of found themselves in over time. But just when you're building a brand and building a vision, CMC's become well known for not only the quality of the machines, but taking care of the customer philosophy they've had, but also just the way in which the family business kind of seeped all the way through the company, and kind of taking care of each other from an employee standpoint, just the culture. Speak a little bit about building a culture of an organization, kind of you and Louie's philosophy through that.
Yeah. So Lewis and Roy had grown up, Lewis had kind of grown up through the Depression era, and Roy had certainly been raised by parents who were products of the Depression era. And so they saw things a little bit differently from us whippersnappers that were, born in the 50s, early 50s. And so it was, we wanted our people to be treated fairly. Not that, let me tell you, if anything, you ask anybody about working for Roy Card, and he would say he was always fair. I didn't always like what he had to say or whatever. He was always fair. So
people always knew where they stood.
They always knew where they stood.
No questions.
Yeah. You didn't have to question that. That's right. When we started, we were careful who we hired, but we also were able to hire some tremendously talented people. But it was a God thing that they showed up for the most part on our doorstep, and just extremely talented people. So in 1981, when we started CMC, and I was driving from the East Brainerd area into work, I would listen to a radio program called Larry Burkett was a guy on the air. It was about business, and it was about Christians in business and people whose faith determined how they treated their employees as well as their customers. That your integrity was not for sale at any price, and that God would lead you, and sometimes He's leading you out of a business. And so, you just followed Him. Louie, when we started CMC, he was not a Christian and had not grown up in the church, but he had been influenced by Christian men and women in his life growing up. And so when he had an experience coming into a relationship with Jesus, it was life-changing for him. It was unbelievable. It was, and so from then, the unequally yoked part of it was over. And so he was hungry. He was being discipled by a gentleman here in town. And what I mean by that, he was meeting regularly with a Christian man, one-on-one, Christian businessman, one-on-one, and his growth was just rapid. And so we were able to rethink some of the things, and we were hungry. We were young kids. We were hungry on what does it look like to be a Christian in business. And so from that, we one thing led to another. Business was doing well. And we said, we really need a chaplain or something for our employees. There were, you have a responsibility, not just to pay them a paycheck, but how can, if they're going to invest the numbers of hours into this company that they do of their life, a number of days and years in their life, can we not add more to them than just a paycheck? And paychecks are important, but and so we decided to bring in a counselor. And there was a company in town that had one, and this person was looking for another company to work with. And so we brought him in to work with us. Here we are years later, probably 35 years later, and we still have someone counseling, available for counseling with our employees. So there was a gentleman, Ken Johnson, who had a big impact on my life. He was the staff director at that time for Christian Businessmen's Committee, which it was called at the time, in Chattanooga. And we developed a friendship. We live in the same neighborhood. And he was connected with Christian men all over the country. And so he put together this group of men, Christian men. One was the quality director with General Motors, and one had his own company, Time Systems, which was a time management book. This is before your phone was your time manager. And another guy was employee rehab, had a rehabilitation company, and there were just another one was I'm going to say IT guy.
Of the time.
Today, at the time, he was, data input. It was a data company. But we would come together, and most of the time it ended up being Chicago. And I was just a whippersnapper. I was young 30s. These guys were in their 40s and 50s, and I would hear them talking, and I'd hear about Ron Huber's Time Systems. And so I brought that back to CMC, and we had seminars for everybody to get on Time Systems. Shaw Industries was even on Time Systems at that time. And the gentleman from General Motors, who was brought the quality videos for us to watch. And so we sat down as a leader. We sat down as a leadership team and watched this series of videos. And we said, well, we need to do something in the order of having a formal quality initiative. And so we found a gentleman to come in and to train us on that. So we were trained on total quality management. We developed a mission statement that everybody could get behind and would be part of what we wanted our company to represent to people who knew us or didn't know us. And we set standards of how we were going to behave, both treat each other as employees here, but also treat our customers and our suppliers. And so we developed that value statement. And at the bottom of this statement was my favorite part. It said, if you don't believe we live up to these, we want to know about it. So we were asking for accountability to make sure that we would do that. And so that was good. And one thing led to another. So not a perfect company. We still made mistakes. We still stumbled big time, but
we're still not a perfect company, but we've heard from customers that when we weren't perfect or we made mistakes, oftentimes it's the way in which we admit our mistakes and then try to make it right that they appreciated more than us being necessarily quote unquote perfect.
That's a part of that honesty that.
Yeah. So, it's really interesting just to hear of all the different people in your life and Louie's life that contributed and just how you utilized that to shape the culture here, but also the quality system of the machinery. And so obviously through your philosophies and how you all were going about run the business, it was impacting the people within the walls of CMC, but it was also impacting the customer base in what you were doing, and that you were building the best tufting machine in the world. So at some point, we've always said the domestic market's our number one market, and still to this day, it's the most important piece for us. But we've had to go and reach out and go global and sell our tufting machines in whatever areas of the world that we possibly could. So talk about that. Talk about when you first said, okay, hey, we have a machine that's really the best in the world, the best of what it does, and we've kept it to our little North Georgia area. Okay, now we're going to show the world what CMC is about. What led to that, and how did you find success through other avenues of doing business in different economic and social type business climates?
I was about to add on to that question as well and just talk about the challenges, because it's so much easier when you're building machines and able to ship them down the highway to Dalton, Georgia, versus a small company that's trying to grow. We got to go out and get business. And then secondly, I would like to know, because I don't know if I know the answer to this question, is who was the first export customer that Card-Monroe ever had? Or what country? You don't have to say the
Mexico. That
Mexico,
was
okay.
Alframbus Mohawk.
Okay.
Which was a Mohawk company. In Harold North sold those two machines, I think. So that was the second and third machine went to Mexico, actually. The first one went to Marglen, John Burns at Marglen.
So you had, the international piece, really, you had an American company kind of taking you with them across the border.
That's right. That's right. Yes, I think one thing I need to say is that we had a philosophy that the light that shines brightest at home shines the furthest away, and so we wanted to develop the machine and be able to have the best machine in this industry, in this country, and from that it would be easier to go to the rest of the world. And so Harold North was with us at Tufco, and actually through a series of events, they decided they didn't need him anymore, which is the biggest mistake they ever made, because we said, well, come with us. And he scratched his head a little bit and he says, I don't know, but I guess so. And so he came over and sold. He had been traveling the world. He was known all over the world.
Right. He had all the contacts.
And I had customers to say, we weren't real sure about Charles Monroe Company, but when Harold North joined you, I knew you guys were serious. And so they didn't know the background to all of that,
right.
but
they knew Harold.
And so they knew Harold. And so they would buy machines from us. So he would go around the world and he would sell our machines, but also set up agents in different countries to sell our equipment. So that's how we started in the beginning with the export market.
Right, and you quickly grew within the UK market, correct? Was that the number, kind of the first, outside of Mexico, that was the first big market for CMC? Or was there
I would say it would be Belgium and the UK. Yeah.
Still very strong countries for us today.
Right. Right.
I find it interesting still today. You go to trade shows and these customers will walk up, potential customers will walk up to our booth, and I've never heard of them. I never met them, and they'll be like, "Oh, CMC." They'll read the sign and they'll say, "You have the best machine," and so it's always just blows my mind, the name recognition that it's a CMC machine. And like you said, a lot of that stemmed from the early days and kind of the philosophy. I'm just re-saying stuff I've heard you say of taking care of the customer. The machine, you can install one machine, be a great salesman. You can install one machine. If the machine doesn't run, you're not going to sell another. It's got to sell
That's
itself.
What Roy Card used to always say. It's easy. It's hard to, what is it, easy to sell the first one, and the next ones you got to make sure they do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, that's right. Machines will sell themselves then. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. And so that's been a big piece, but also one thing we can't not talk about in this podcast is the evolution of technologies. So the basics of the tufting machine that we have today that Lewis and Roy invented are pretty much in the gauging area, and the basics of tufting is pretty much the same, but the evolutions of technology on top of that have come obviously miles within that time frame. So what have you seen from that, and what do you think was the biggest one or two technological advancements within our industry?
And can you imagine from shifting graph paper in your garage to where it's come to now? I mean, I just think about, could you even envision back then what the tufting machine would come to today?
Absolutely not. It just, as technology was developed out there, I mean, servo motors, and we said, servo motors, we'll run a cut pile machine. We'll put a servo motor on the yarn feed, and we'll put a couple of servo motors on the cloth feed, and we'll have a computer driven machine. Well, that was just the beginning of it. And then we said, well, what if you could control each individual end of yarn? So if you've got 1,800 ends of yarn on the tufting machine, you would need 1,800 servo motors. And do you know what a trick it is to be able to control 1,800 servo motors when you're operating that machine at 1,000 times a minute, and you're in one revolution of the main shaft, you've got a small window to change the speed of the yarn feed and do it with 1,800 motors and continue to do it. The information traffic that it takes to be able to do that, that blows my mind.
It blows mine too. And we're in the business and we see it all the time. We deal with it. It still blows our mind. But I don't think that's the common person who just happens to walk on carpet or just occasionally look at it realizes what all goes into it, and the job that our customers do. Not only design, but the constructions that they come up with, the fiber systems that they come up with.
Pushing the capabilities of the motors.
Of the machines and everything. Would you say that the servo motor was probably the biggest technological advancement within the tufted industry?
Yes. Now, I think we need to step back a little bit to the development of servo-driven shifting needle bars, because the graphics machines, when we're able to apply servo technology to the stepping needle bars, that's what made changing from one pattern to the next with the graphics machine and that capability, that's what made it really go. And so we took that and then we added servos to the yarn feed. But yeah, the servo motors and their different applications, no doubt about it, that's brought us to where we are today.
And I know it's the biggest probably development we've had, but I would be curious to know, and it doesn't have to be necessarily our highest selling machine or that customers love the most. What was your favorite invention that Card-Monroe ever came out with?
Oh, wow.
Could be machine platform, could be an attachment.
One of the earliest machines Brad, your dad had just come to work with us, and he'd been in the radio industry and been on the air, and
it's all coming full circle.
Had a broadcasting.
Yeah, he's got a son on the air now.
Yeah, he got a degree in broadcasting.
2 sons. Yeah, sons.
Yeah. Degree in broadcasting, and he came, and so I'd taken him to sales, and we just developed this precision gun cut uncut machine, and I took Brad with me, and we were able to get some beautiful teal yarn And so we were making this solid color pattern, very intricate loop and cuts, precision cut, uncut. So it would precisionally either put a loop in there or put cut pile. And we would take that, and I took the first 5 carpet mills that we went to, they placed orders. And I said, Brad, it's not this easy. It's not this easy. It just so happens that this machine has hit a sweet spot. It was revolutionary. And so he still quotes that today, I think.
And how did I know Charlie Monroe would pick the development and talk about single color patterning?
Yeah, I with a graphics machine, you were moving color around so much, and all these other developments were centered around moving color, and the biggest market for that is the commercial market, the commercial segment, and the hospitality segment, which would be, it would be hotels and restaurants and office buildings and on and on.
Well, but it's placing color was hard, and we figured that out. But it's also was equally probably as hard to do those kind of constructions when you didn't have the color to play, the game with as well. So I could see where the excitement is over color, but the practicality is with those solid color designs. So makes for interesting. Like we said, we've always put a lot of time and emphasis and resources and marketing around our R&D efforts, and really trying to set ourselves apart from that machinery manufacturer that gives our customers something else to offer their end users. And something that the industry's relied on us for, and probably even before the CMC days, you all have done a great job of creating those new styles and those new interests from a soft surface standpoint. And of course, we're focused on higher speeds and higher efficiencies and making our machinery more productive for our customers running them every day, whether that's straight sew speeds or shifting speeds, whatever it is, becomes more cost effective for them. So we're R&Ding around that too. But I think one of those things we've really hung our hat on and really brought to the industry, and especially you all did for many, many years, was that the pattern, fabric, styling industry innovations.
Yes, and our customers, the carpet manufacturers, have this insatiable desire for something new. The average consumer doesn't buy carpet but maybe one time in 5 years or 7 years or something like that. So they don't understand as fully styling and how styling changes as much as our customers do, and our customers' outlets, which would be carpet stores or distributors or whatever. And I would recommend anyone listening to the podcast, you take time and walk into a carpet store and just look at all the different carpet styles, colors, constructions that are available today. It's phenomenal. It's not the shag carpet that everybody pulled out to put down hardwood or LVT or linoleum or whatever through the years.
Yeah, we're going through that process right now, redoing our kids' bedrooms. And so I went back into some carpet stores that I hadn't been in. And it really is just the styles that our customers creatively have come up with through the enablement of our machinery is truly something. And I enjoy going in there and just looking, just knowing. And it's also, just speaks a testament of CMC that the vast majority, if not all of the things that I'm looking at from a technology perspective are off CMC machinery. And I think that just speaks to the amount of development and just the creative people that we have within these walls of CMC that have over time continued to develop new things over the years. The latest one, of course, we've talked a lot about ColorPoint Sports for the artificial grass industry, but there were so many other advancements in technological things, whether it's from a software standpoint or a fabric standpoint or a hardware standpoint over those years that all have kind of led to to where we are today.
And I think it takes it back to, what has made us successful throughout the years, and listening to Charlie here today talk about, thinking about what has made CMC successful and customers want to keep coming back to us. He hit on it earlier when they started out making gauge parts, and people say, if you can make this fine tolerance, why won't you just make the machine? And that's what's made CMC successful, is always listening to the customer. And they have asked, they come to us because they know we'll deliver, but they know we'll listen to them and take it to heart and better ourselves. And I think that's the key that you hit on when you talked about customers ask about new machines, is CMC listens to customers. And that's something that's been instilled from us from the beginning, because Lewie would walk around here and say multiple times, everybody knows it, if we don't take care of the customer today, somebody else will. And that's just the mentality of always listening, always figuring out what the customer desire is so we can meet that when they come to us. And I think that's what's made us so successful.
Yeah, and I think too, speaking of just the beginnings of CMC and the starting of CMC, and just listening to you also today, it reminds me that, if you treat your employees right and you love on them and you care for them, then that overflows and spills into your product as well. And your customers, maybe not directly, but they'll feel the impact of running your business that way and treating your people well and having a good place to work and a culture in which to work in. That all it all goes hand in hand together. So there's no doubt about it. And we have the benefit, Will and I especially, of being in the marketplace and being in front of the customer and getting to ride those coattails of
the generations before us.
Yeah, of generations before us, and just the ingenuity and the vision that Lewis and Roy and you and Lewie had. And it's still very evident today and around the world. And it's fun to continue that legacy as we move forward. So any parting comments from you? You're enjoying your board seat, but yet retired life these days? You're still, I tell a lot of people, they ask how you're doing to me a lot as I go around the world. And I said, oh, he's still around. He's still asking me. He's still involved. He's still very much wanting to know how things are going, and has his pulse on it, but also enjoying retirement and spend time with Myra. So,
yeah, I enjoy the flexibility, but I also enjoy the fact, it's a different story, because the fourth generation is right here. And this has been, what a great thing it's been to sit with the three of you today and understand that you are the fourth generation, and that the heart you have for this business, the dedication, the vision you have to take it well beyond where it is today, as you're doing. And the people see you and respect you, and I'm very thankful for that your character represents what we're all about and who we represent on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for this time.
Well, we appreciate that.
This has been great.
We've had a lot of great examples before us. So it's been
and Will and I and Andrew, we get to sit behind the microphones, but we have a lot of help and a lot of other family members, Lucas being one, that are key pieces to this puzzle and Greg, our current CEO, and your father as well, Brad, just key pieces to where we are today and where we're going in the future and our growth trajectory, and getting into things like automation that we would probably never would have gotten into without Greg's help, and Lucas is doing a great job on the internal sides of finance and operations. And, we have other family members running other aspects of the business and really doing a good job. So it's one of those things. It's fun being in a family business and being able to work alongside your family members and do something with a common goal with them. So I've really appreciated that fact. It's unique. And a lot of people have often said, I can't work with my dad, or I can't work with my brother or my cousin or whatever it be. And for us, it's just always worked. And so I've been very thankful for that it hasn't always been perfect. And, doesn't mean that we don't have disagreements, but at the end of the day, it's always just work. So I've appreciated that. And a lot of it was stemmed from you and Lewie and just the culture set up. But it's been fortunate for all of us that it's to a place where it's healthy and it's good, and it's a joy to get up and go to a place where you don't feel like you have to just because you're in the family. You enjoy it and you want to be a caretaker of what it is to be in the future. So
in 1981, when I went to work for Card-Monroe Company, Wallace Hamill, who hired me, said, a family member, you're to be the example, not the exception.
I've heard you say it to me a time or 2 or 12 when I wasn't the example.
We have quite a few family members here in the business, and I've had a lot of people say, how does that work for you? And I said, well, all of them are of high character. All of them know the lane in which they're to be running in. They're good at what they do. They are contributors to the business. I don't know what we do without them. And
I think that goes back to something, Zach was talking about how some family business people are like, I can't work with family, or this is just a family business by name, but it's part of the culture. Even if you are a family member here, I remember my grandfather saying, you're not guaranteed a job here. You got to be a fit. You got to have the right skill sets that we're looking for. And I think that's something that makes our family business functional and work. Not only are we all high character and great people, but we don't feel like we're entitled to a job here. And that's something that y'all have ingrained and made a great part of that culture.
Well said, Will. Well said.
And Will, I think that's a great way to wrap up another episode of Tuft Talk by Card-Monroe. Been a special episode for me personally, have my father, Charles Monroe, join us for this episode. Once again, like and follow, and Will, close us out. Hit the noti bell, of course, but what else do you have for us?
I wasn't going to say that this time. I was going to just say hit the notifications button.
Yeah, right. You like that
just not get you in trouble with your kids.
Yeah, you like that noti bell.
No, as a side note, if you guys would like to dive into a little bit more of what we've talked about some of here today, we have our Tufting Legacies book that just gives a history of the industry and of CMC. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to reach out and we'll get you a copy.
Yeah, best way to do that would be sales@cardmonroe, all one word, .com, or you can hit us on a direct message on social media and reach out to us, and we'll get you a copy of the book. It's very interesting as far as the tufting industry and, of course, Card-Monroe. So thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time.